So that was Mongrel, which is available on Steam, sorry, and I'm terrified by how close that was to my nightmare last night. Anyway, moving on, we have the AMA. Thank you very much for submitting all your questions on our Discord. We've got a new channel area for asking questions where people can vote on what you've submitted, and we answer the best ones by vote. As it happens, we thought for the first one, we've obviously gone and answered everything we possibly could, including loads of Click Team Fusion 3 questions, which I wasn't expecting. So I'm going to start. Forgive me, I'm reading off a sheet here. We have 6 pages of your questions to answer here. So I'm afraid I don't remember who has asked each of these. Apologies, but thank you for your submissions. First question. Why are there times when Click Team goes to sleep for a month or longer? I wish I slept that long. So as a small company, we realize that sometimes we aren't giving you a steady stream of information. Our new Fusion 3 blog posts are all on Patreon, so we're starting to give out more information about that. We're obviously doing more live streams, and we'll be looking at a podcasting project, talking about Fusion and Click Team, but also the wider industry and things like artificial intelligence and debating the pros and cons of using that, and interesting things like this. So we're really trying to step up the communication there, and it's not something we've been brilliant at before, but we're really trying to do better. And I'm a community manager now, so I'm trying to be online a lot more. I do answer questions in the middle of the night, even though I should be asleep. But yeah, it's something we're really working on, and we've taken your feedback on board, and we hope you can see the improvement, including these monthly streams. So do make sure to check in the next one, which I've written down here, 18th of July. 3rd Fridays of each month, and it will always be at these times, so 7 p.m. GMT, and at the moment, daylight savings wise, 8 p.m. in London, 9 p.m. in most of Europe, 3 p.m. I think in New York, and an unfortunate 5 in the morning for our Australian viewers there. Okay, question number 2. Have you considered reviving the name Click and Play for anything? I think it's nostalgic and still holds some brand recognition value, and it's simply fun to say. Well, as we heard from our interview with Mig there, that's where he started, and so did my brother and I. So Eve says, yes, we have. We have recently considered several initiatives, including making the original available, possibly. Let us know your thoughts. So when we come to do our next AMA, you could send us some more questions about that and give us some ideas. Next question. Are there plans to continue supporting Fusion 2.5 after the release of Fusion 3? Yes. Fusion 3 is going to be a brand new product. It will stand on its own. It's not designed to kick Fusion 2.5 out of existence at all. So we don't know exactly how long. It will probably depend on demand and sales, but for probably several years at least, we intend to keep supporting 2.5 with new build updates, new features. So yeah, don't worry, Fusion 2.5 is staying if you don't want to move up to Fusion 3. Will there be updates for the exporters? Eve says the new 296 update includes changes and improvements to all of the exporters, and I do have very, very, very long, lots of pages of a changelog, which, as I said, we'll upload to our we'll upload to Discord as well, but our Patreon, so make sure to check it out there, and the Fusion 3 blog while you're there. Is it currently known how well, on average, Click Team's console port process for Fusion 2.5 games handles running on Switch 2's backwards compatibility capabilities? That's a bit of a tongue twister. Eve says a large majority of Made with Fusion titles on Switch run well on Switch 2. A few run even better. We've had perhaps 3 reports of flashing screen occasionally on a few select titles. It's a switch to OS issue that Nintendo will resolve, as some of their first-party titles suffer from it as well. So it looks like good compatibility and speed there. Fusion 2.5 or otherwise, can we get updated info/templates on how to make our own extensions in Fusion? Most of us are non-coders, so having a template or tutorial to mess with would be a huge help and might take a load off ClickTeam's minds if the right tinkerers come around. So there are lots of extension examples available on GitHub from various developers, including Phi. Sorry if I've said that wrong. Phi, Defisim, etc. This should help, but we can definitely post some links to those on our Discord, and we'll get them added to Patreon as well, just to help you find them. Who at ClickTeam implemented physics objects in Fusion, and can they fix or improve them? Francois Lyonnais, who is no longer with the company, he actually implemented the physics objects, and at the moment, it's quite a tricky thing to update. There are a lot of issues which Francois' genius managed to overcome them when he was working on them originally. So we are looking at how to do this, but it's a complex process, so it may take a little while. This may be a stupid question, but will Fusion 2.5 developers or Fusion 3 developers ever be able to self-publish their console games, assuming they have access to Xbox publishing, PlayStation partners, Nintendo Switch dev access, etc.? Now that I'm a PlayStation partner, I would really like to self-publish and port a Fusion title of mine to PS5 in the future, but I'm not sure if that's ever going to be possible. And you can self-publish now. Currently, we provide console conversion services to the developer or a publisher. So you can go through our services to do that, but not yourself. And a lot of people wonder why, but there are actually a lot of complications, a lot of steps, things that you have to meet legal-wise, that Nintendo and Microsoft, for example, really insist upon. And it's a lot of complexity for the average developer. So it's actually something that it's the reason why we have this service, to help smooth that process. And also we have the expertise working with those partners to make sure that we can get the game running as it needs and handle the various issues. So definitely, again, you saw our pro services trailer, which I'll play again after the AMA here, and that really helps to port things and work with your games. So if you'd like to get in touch, go to service.clickteam.com and select professional services when you open a ticket there. Are there plans to continue supporting 2.5? Oh, we've answered that one. There we go. Will Fusion 3 include any new features or improvements to the event system that help with keeping projects more organized? I know it's already possible to stay organized with current tools, but I'm curious if there are plans to enhance this further in Fusion 3. Fusion 3 allows you to make your own objects, like in Fusion 2.5, where you've had actions and conditions and expressions that you can put. Apologies, I've misread. Like in Fusion 2.5, where you had behaviors, i.e. private events to the object, this is expanded very much on in Fusion 3. So you can add custom actions, conditions, and expressions to objects to essentially turn them into your own extension. And that's without having to use C++ or something like that to code an extension. And this makes it much easier to move a lot of functionality that would otherwise clutter up your event editor into your own objects. So, for example, if you have 100 lines of code which deal with updating player positions in an RPG game, like we're moving troops around or something, moving troops around, you could create your own evented extension object specifically to deal with those things, and you might have inputs to that being a list of the objects that you want to move. You then pass that to it, and it can then move all of those. And in that way, you can compact down the Yep, Linky's saying that. That's exactly what we're adding. So you can compact down your code into more manageable objects. Yeah, it's going to be a very, very, very powerful feature of Fusion 3, that. Are multi-platform exports going to be using Android Studio and or Xcode projects, or will they build fully standalone? It will be a choice each developer can decide on for each project based on what functionality they need or want to use. Our goal for a Fusion 3 project to be convenient, centralized. Sorry, our goal is for a Fusion 3 project to be convenient, centralized location to manage everything for all the platforms developers want to target, but we don't want that to be a bottleneck or point of restriction. Will Fusion 3 include more advanced viewport features to easily allow split screen? Do apologize, put my teeth back in. To allow third time's the charm, split screen, viewport zoom, rotations, etc. Yes. To what extent will Fusion 2.5 projects be convertible to Fusion 3 projects? We have basic support for this currently, but considering how many different 2.5 extensions there are, it will take some time to add all of the conversions for everything to Fusion 3's new way of doing things. However, as we talked about just a moment ago there with the evented objects, you may well be able to create your own drop-in replacements in Fusion 3, which will allow you to overcome some of those incompatibilities from missing extensions. Will Fusion 3 have JSON structure or any Git-friendly alternative? Also, yes, which will of course make working in a team a lot easier, and repo management and stuff is obviously going to be much more integrated and possible with Fusion 3 than as has been before with our tools. Will Fusion 3 include some easy, good, and powerful tiling engine? We don't have anything planned at the moment. I think it could be done as an extension, but it's not a priority to have as a core feature. We will, however, have all the improvements in F3 make it easier to implement such a thing yourself. And that could include making your own extension with actions, conditions, and expressions and properties. I'm going to do a demonstration of how to make an array level drawing system shortly after this, but that's something you could actually build into your own extension, and you could possibly create compatibility for other existing tile-based editors. There are quite a lot of tools out there people like to use. I have quite an unpopular opinion about the object selection in Fusion. I actually think it's pretty good and powerful, way simpler than people tend to think. It's mainly misunderstood due to a lack of documentation and good learning resources about it. It was said it's going to be changed in Fusion 3, but by how much? I hope the filtering, picking philosophy still exists, but just refined, not a completely different system. We're working on enhancing the object selection functionality by giving more control and clarity over how it flows through each condition. There are some changes to the order of how actions are processed on multiple instances. In Fusion 2.5, the actions for additional instances would be pushed to the end of the action list, which means that certain things could happen out of order. In Fusion 3, they will happen a lot more predictably. We're not even, that's a third of the way through there, lots to go. What physics engine will Fusion 3 use? In Fusion, it's an old version of Box 2D, so will it be Box 2D 3 for the new engine? We're working on upgrading from Box 2D 2 to Box 2D 3, but we also want to make sure that people will still be able to plug in other physics engines if they want. Will Fusion 3 have an animation editor with advanced features like other engines? Think of bone editor, keyframes, layers, etc. We have some preliminary experiments with bone animations, but they are not really ready for prime time at the moment. Under the hood, the engine supports keyframed animations for a variety of things. I suspect they could be leveraged by an extension or a future update to allow for certain animations of this sort. There are, however, a lot of different competing 2D bone animation systems out there that could be imported. If, for example, a spine animation object were to be implemented, then editing the object could open up the third-party spine editor. Cool. Once you save the animation, it will be updated in your project. What should we expect from the built-in debugging tools of Fusion 3? Will it have call stacks, better data overview and editing, breakpoints, etc.? We're working on adding more advanced debugging functionality like this to the Fusion 3 editor, and we would like to support it with remote debugging too, including on consoles. It's a complicated feature to support though, so it's going to take some time to fully implement. And as with a lot of things, Fusion 3 will launch with a broad core set of features, but some of them will still continue to evolve after launch, and this may be one of those. In a Fusion 3 blog post, custom actions, conditions, and expressions were discussed, but what about custom properties, which Linky just asked about earlier there? Or are values technically still the same thing? Like, will it still allow for combo boxes, sliders, color pickers, buttons, etc.? Custom properties are basically the replacement for alterable values. All of our properties we use internally can have optional hints on how to modify them best. This would be very easy to allow the user to set as well. For example, the angle property is a float, a decimal number. In practice, the value can be any value, but for the sake of making it easy to use in the property tree, we made it into a slider that has a range from 0 to 360 degrees. It would be interesting to hear user feedback on which UI controls they would like to see for modifying some basic types. What can we expect from the Fusion 3 SDK? The main problems with the current SDK are it's very old-fashioned, undocumented, and communicates with the internal data and functions of the runtime/editor directly. No cleaner APIs and wrappers were implemented, not to mention every extension needed to be written in the language native for the platform. This is why forks like Dark Edith exist. So will such things be improved, and most importantly, will it give us more control over the editor itself? For now, we're using C++ 17 as a baseline for all target platforms, and code quality is a high priority for us. Some platforms, e.g. Apple and browsers, still require using other languages to access certain functionality, but the vast majority of tasks can be accomplished in Fusion 3 events or C++. Controlling the Fusion 3 editor itself is something we're still exploring our options with. Most of our focus has been so far on the functionality for the resulting apps and games. The sound engine in Fusion is pretty basic. In what areas will Fusion 3 improve on this? Similar to graphics, audio is an area where each platform does things quite differently, so we're still evaluating our options in this area. At the very least, we'll be supporting all the same functionality as Fusion 2.5, but we would like to add functionality such as audio effects and positional audio. Some platforms support this natively, while other platforms require implementing it manually, so finding a good way to expose this in a uniform way in the Fusion 3 editor poses its own challenges. One thing we experimented with was allowing sounds to be basic objects that you could move around and attach to other objects. That way you could leverage positional audio and then very easily allow for the sound to automatically stop if the owner object was destroyed. Will we still be able to choose the rendering pipeline like we can with current Fusion, for example, between DirectX, OpenGL, or Vulkan, or is it going to be OpenGL only? And if so, will runtimes like iOS get an exception to use Metal instead? We recently switched to a different rendering backend that allows choosing which underlying graphics API to use. The choice can be made dynamically at application start or restart, so it could be presented as an option in games or launchers. Shader effects are compiled for each different format as needed by each different graphics API. Can we expect built-in support for basic 3D features? They can be useful for 2.5D games or 2D games with 3D effects and elements. 3D is a big can of worms, as it's an ever-expanding topic. The engine itself is prepared for 3D in some sense, as all coordinates in Fusion 3 can exist in a 3D space. We don't do typical 3D engine functionality like shadows or 3D collision detection. Excuse me. Fusion 3 is in itself still a 2D engine, but we allow certain things to extend into 3D space. There will obviously be a lot more to watch on that as it develops. Will documentation for Fusion 3, whether an included manual or stuff on the website, include links to modern, high-quality, free resources that exist in this day and age, such as free visual assets, free software for making graphics and music and sound, etc., and things like this to help newcomers better learn what software exists to possibly suit their needs that the engine isn't really geared to make up on its own. I think linking to third-party resources is perhaps not something we should do from the documentation. That said, some resources page on the website might link to other useful websites. If anyone saw earlier the interview with Danny, who's developing our new services, you'll have noticed that there's quite a lot of work gone into finding resources and searching on the new system. So I think that will really cover what you're asking there a lot more. So, for example, you would just type in Tile editor or bone editor or music creation, something like that, and we could link there to lots of tools and things that you could try to use. Will we get a new joystick / gamepad object that will have automatic will have automatic gamepad detection and not have to code your own engine? I wish we could just have it worked out like when you disconnect player 2 or 3 and plug it in, that controls are not messed up where player 1 has player 3's buttons and so on. It's been a nightmare. A unified game input system is a very high priority for us, and we are actively working on having high quality first-class support for this in the Fusion 3 editor and runtime. Will Fusion 3 just support 2D, or will 3D be an option for game projects? So a bit of an expansion on the earlier question. 3D, as in 3D games, is not the primary focus of Fusion 3. We prepared the engine to be extensible, and we can allow certain things to exist in the 3D space without issue, as we said. I imagine that it would be possible to make a semi-3D isometric game where you populate the scene with 3D items. Under the hood, they would still be governed by the 2D nature of Fusion 3 when it comes to things like collision detection. Certain features like shadows would have to be implemented by the user unless we somehow make a dedicated feature for it, or if there's popular demand. So whilst that might not be what you're hoping to hear, I hope the message is coming across that Fusion 3 is being developed not to repeat the choices we made with past products where you get locked into a certain for example, with the physics objects that we're now having some trouble updating and extending. Fusion 3 has been written from the ground up to be very, very flexible. We don't know exactly where we might take it in the future. It may be that we add 3D at some point if there is demand for it, but at launch, no, that won't be there. Since there are a couple of standard effect transitions that don't seem to work, the ones you can choose in the Actives property panel, my question, will they be fixed on the new 296 build or completely written in Fusion 3, rewritten? Transitions will be much more customizable in Fusion 3. They can be evented yourself, and you can use pixel shaders for them if you so wish. This makes them much more powerful than in Fusion 2.5. That was answered by the Fusion 3 team there, but I don't remember reading that in the changelog. We can check that. Small question. Will Fusion 3 support GIF importing? It hasn't been a priority. Right now, we are only using PNG files as they are lossless, compact in size, and allow for alpha channels. GIF animations are more geared towards low color animations, obviously only with 1-bit transparency. If they can be imported in the animation editor, they would probably get turned into separate files and stored as PNG. There are, of course, lots and lots of tools around on the web and so on where you can convert these things now. I don't know if we'll support a PNG, animated PNGs. That might be a way to look at that. Maybe a stupid question, but will Fusion 2.5 developers or Fusion 3 devs ever be able to self-publish their console games, assuming they have access to Xbox? Did we not answer that one? We did. That's in there twice for some reason. Apologies. Will there be a Linux version of the editor? Yes, and Mac as well. Anna's is working on Fusion 3 on a Mac, and it's also being worked on Windows platform as well, but it's been built in such a way that we can port it to those other platforms. Will Delta Time be natively implemented in Fusion 3 for stuff like physics objects, player movement, etc.? Yes, this is already implemented. We currently support various methods. By default, it will use Delta Time, so no matter the frame rate, objects will move at the same speed. If, however, one needs, you can change the runtime with a fixed Delta Time for more predictable results. Will Fusion 3 keep the focus on multimedia and not stick with just games? Making tools and apps using Fusion is great, and better UI elements would be welcome. Yes, the Fusion 3 editor itself is actually made using the same technology that will power your eventual games that you create. As such, we have a bunch of UI elements that are already implemented to bring you the Fusion 3 interface, and we're working on new ones, but the power of the engine to create what you use to create your apps is basically, it's by design, it's part of the DNA of Fusion 3. Can we expect better support for stuff like inverse kinematics, procedural animation, bones, etc.? Referencing the other question about this, inbuilt support for this is probably not going to be in the first version. Extensions that import third-party animation systems like Spine should be very doable, possibly even using Fusion 3's evented object creation. Fusion 3 allows for users to make their own objects and bundle them as a single reusable object, and this could perhaps fill the gap until this becomes available. So you might create your own extension where you bundle something like a string parser and a string object into one object that you then extend with your own functionality. So you might have an object that you just send a comma separated variable list to, and then it automatically dumps a string where you asked it to with coordinates and does all of the magic for you. So there's a lot of power in the evented extension system. Will Fusion 3 have no RAM limitation? Fusion 3 is currently 64-bit only for both the editor and resulting apps and games. So it will have the same memory constraints as any other 64-bit application, which is obviously very high. Note, however, that if you would like to create games for Nintendo Switch 1, you would still have to be cognizant of the hardware memory constraints of that platform. And as with publishing games for mobiles or HTML5 web stuff, you obviously have to tailor what you do to make sure that you don't overload those systems, memory availability, and so on. Will we receive Android, iOS, web, Mac, maybe Linux, Windows 10/11/more versions free if we get Fusion 3 paid? Pricing and structure are yet to be determined. We don't have a solid answer to this at the moment because we're exploring a lot of options. Obviously, the model of subscription is not a very popular one, and we're very keen to listen to our users and do the best for you. So there will be more information nearer the time of launch. Will we receive all extensions free for Fusion 2.5 in Fusion 3? There are a very large number of extensions in Fusion 2.5, and many will be obsolete or replaced by alternative ways of doing things in Fusion 3. Fusion 3 uses a radically different architecture for extensibility as well, so this is not a question that can be directly answered. Stay tuned for more communications about Fusion 3. Make sure to check out our Fusion 3 blog on our Patreon. What will Fusion 3 look like? Again, go and have a look at our Patreon. We've got quite a few screenshots there and showing off how the interface looks. And you don't have to have an account to view that. How will it function? At a minimum, all of the major functionality of Fusion 2.5 will be included in Fusion 3. Although, as we've said, there may be slightly different ways of achieving things in Fusion 3 that you could also achieve in Fusion 2.5. How fast will it perform? We expect performance to be noticeably better than Fusion 2.5 in most scenarios. How will you ensure that the files won't get reverse engineered by intelligent people like so many older games before it? Fusion 3 projects are in fact compiled to native machine code, and that is not impenetrable. No code ever is completely safe, but it is significantly many orders of magnitude harder to do that, and it takes a lot of expertise to do. So games will be very much more protected in that sense. And finally, page 6 of questions, the last one. What will the approach to HTML5 be? I know blog posts from around 2017 mentioned mscripton being used for web publishing. Is this still the preferred method? And if so, that means running under WebAssembly. Yes. If not, what other method has been chosen for HTML5 exports? Web technology continues to evolve at a rapid pace, and so plans may change again, of course. But currently we're looking to WebAssembly and WebGPU, among others, so use of JavaScript will be minimal. And that could obviously have a lot of implication for more performant HTML5 applications. So, my throat has dried out completely, so